really open our hearts to the situation of all sentient beings. So of course that includes others we share the planet with, but it includes also other living beings in other realms. So just all of sentient life. Yeah, living beings who want happiness, who don't want suffering. And see that we're all exactly the same in that way. We may have different bodies, we may have different thoughts, but we all want happiness and not suffering. So given that that is the state of being, it only seems right to work for the welfare of all. To not separate out our happiness as more important than anybody else's. And in that way, to try and bring about the welfare of all living beings. To attain the highest spiritual states that we can, so we can be best equipped to do that. So that when the opportunity to help comes, we do not hesitate because of fear of what will happen to ourselves. We do not hesitate because we don't know what to do. We don't hesitate because we don't know how to do it. But rather, from our own side, there will be no impediment to acting for the benefit of others in a very spontaneous, natural way that is free of all effort. So that comes through purifying our mind, through habituating our mind with virtue, through realization of the various aspects of the path. And so the Vajrasattva meditation is one powerful component of purification. So with this long-term motivation, this aspiration for full Buddhahood, let us concentrate this weekend on the Vajrasattva practice to help us clear away obstacles from becoming Buddhists. So we practice together in a community. We're all a community this weekend. The Abbey is a community even after you people go home. But at least this weekend, we're all one community. And what's important in a community is that we share the same purpose. We're here for the same reason. And so that's why we continually, one of the reasons why, we continually renew our bodhicitta motivation, because that motivation not only is a personal one that we feel we want to do, but it's also the thing that links us together as a common community. Yeah, because I was thinking if I was here kind of sharing the Dharma with other people, and people didn't have at least some kind of contrived bodhicitta, but were sitting here thinking, oh, well, yeah, this is a good place to go over the holidays because I can't stand it at home and they make good food. So I'll sit on the teachings because that's what I have to do. Or somebody were here thinking, oh, I'll learn something about Vajrasattva, then I can become a teacher and go back to my group at home, and I'll be the teacher and instruct everybody in the practice, and then I'll have some kind of status. Okay? So if people had like different worldly motivations, then it would feel very odd for us to be together sharing the Dharma. Yeah? So in generating our motivation each time, we're really coming together as a community that we're all here for the same purpose. Even if that purpose of Buddhahood we don't understand completely, it's eons away, it seems difficult to do, never mind, all of us have this deep, heartfelt appreciation for being of great service and benefit to living beings and alleviating suffering. Yeah, so we're all at different points on this, but we all have this somewhere inside. And so cultivating our motivation really brings us together in this point. We all also have obstacles on the path. Yeah. You people are very fortunate. This weekend, you all made it here. Yeah. We've had quite a number of cancellations for this retreat. I don't know how many, a lot, because either people were sick or mostly because of the weather. Yeah. And so those people didn't have the karma to come. Yeah. One man was very sweet. He said he was going to do the practice at home all weekend, which I thought was really lovely. But, you people had the good karma and the fortune to be here and to spend, New Year's Eve not in Times Square. Yeah, with that ridiculous ball that falls down and all these drunken people. And this year with police all around, I don't know who would go there, now. But anyway, we aren't there, aren't we happy to be here instead? Yeah. And so, coming together with that kind of feeling and purpose and sharing it together. Yeah. And knowing that we all have obstacles, knowing that we all make mistakes, yeah, knowing that we can't really say one of us is better or worse than the other, because there's no big karmic, file on us somewhere up in the clouds with a tally of our good deeds and our bad deeds. That doesn't exist. Okay. So we're all in the samsara together. Yeah. We're all doing our best to get out. And we're doing our best to help others do that as well. Okay. So Vajrasattva is going to help us do that. Because the Vajrasattva practice is particularly for purification of destructive karma. Okay, so we have lots of destructive karma. In this retreat, we'll be doing some meditations about reviewing this life, actions that we've done, and trying to come to terms with them, to accept responsibility for what's our responsibility, purifying, regretting, making amends, making determinations to do things differently in the future. So we'll all be doing that, yeah, in one way or another, yeah. Because we all have we all have 84,000 afflictions. So please don't think you're special and that you have only 83,999. So you're better than everybody else. And don't think you have 84,001 so that you're worse than everybody else. Okay? So let's not have any comparison. Yeah. Comparison, comparing ourselves to others, I think is a big problem in our Dharma practice. And it just breeds competition, it breeds jealousy, it breeds arrogance, and it takes us away from our own heartfelt intention. Because becoming a Buddha is not about being better than everybody else. And it's not about winning a competition. And it's not about, being praised for your spiritual attainments and having them written up in some history book so that 15 eons from now, when we're in who knows what realm, people are reading about us and asking questions about us and so on. Or, and it's not about in the future, so somebody doing their PhD dissertation about our life. Okay? Yeah, I think about this because I'm pretty certain sometime, in the future, somebody will do their PhD on the history of Sravasti Abbey, or on the history of the Bhikshuni ordination of Western nuns, or who knows what. Yeah, the people will do PhDs about every big Buddhist center and Buddhist organization in this country. Yeah, won't they? Yeah, and they'll get pieces of paper that reward them for doing that. And, they'll spend all their time looking through all of our emails. Yeah, reading, trying to intuit. You infer, we did this, we didn't do that, what we thought. Yeah, they'll be better than WikiLeaks. Yeah, in looking at everything we did. And then they'll expose it to the whole world in their dissertation, which of course only their 3 professors will read, and then it'll get lost in the archive somewhere. Okay? But we're not here for that reason. Yeah, that's not our purpose in being here. Okay? So we're all here really to purify and to cease those obscurations and obstacles that we have. Yeah. So the karma that we do, karma simply means action, intended actions that we've done. These leave, for lack of a better word, some kind of energy trace, that goes along with our mind stream, and that ripens when the conducive circumstances are there for it to ripen. So happiness always comes from virtue, unhappiness from non-virtue. If you don't like virtue, the words virtue and non-virtue, you can say wholesome and unwholesome. I don't know which one is worse. Yeah, as in terms of translation. Yeah. What do you people think about virtue versus wholesome? Yeah, I like virtue. Wholesome, I think of, the true American wholesome milk. Yeah, kind of, yeah, so that doesn't go well with me. Anyway, you get the meaning of the word, I hope. So, it's a good time to kind of look at ourselves and sort through what do we not feel good about having done. Yeah, because I think all of us at the end of the day, we may do certain actions and other people may even praise us for them. But if we don't feel good in our heart about what we've done, then something's not right. Now, when we don't feel good in our heart about something, we have to look at why not. Okay? One reason could be that we are super self-critical, and we don't give ourselves any credit for anything. And anything good we do, there's always a but to it, and we criticize ourselves. Okay, so if we don't feel good about something, check and see if it's because we're being hypercritical. If that's the reason, we have to throw out that supercritical mind because it's unrealistic. I'm sorry, you're really not the worst person in the world. Yeah, don't claim that distinction for yourself. Yeah, and don't try and make yourself into that. Yeah. So if that's the case, we don't feel good because we're self-critical. We need to stop the self-criticism and learn to rejoice in our own virtue. Yeah, and rejoicing in our own virtue is the fourth of the 7-limb prayer. Rejoicing in our own and others' virtue. So you have to do it. Okay. Yeah, either that or you're going to have a 6-limb prayer. And when everybody's reciting it together on the fourth one, you're going to go, So we have to rejoice at our own virtue. That's really important. Yeah. Now, other times we don't feel good about what we've done because we know that we hurt someone and that we had a but rotten motivation, a very self-centered motivation. Okay, so those things, then we need to really look at what our motivation was and reveal it. The word confess in the third of the 7-limb prayers, I confess all my negativities. The word confess, it means to split open. In the same way, with our logs, you split them open to see what's inside. So we open up about our negativities. Yeah. So instead of rationalizing, justifying, denying, repressing, suppressing, and everything else we do, we're able to look frankly, realistically at what we've done and regret what is worthy of regret. Okay. Now, sometimes it's not so easy to determine what is worthy of regret and what isn't. Because we grew up in a culture, or at least I did, I don't know about you, where guilt was a big thing. And if I did something that made somebody else feel bad, then that made me a bad person. I committed a negative action because I did something that made someone else feel bad. That is not the definition of non-virtue, because it can happen in many situations that we do something with a good motivation and other people still feel bad about what we did. Okay. When I got ordained, my parents were not happy at all. Does that mean that my being ordained was destructive karma? I sure hope not, So it's not that everything we do has to be pleasing to everybody, because it's totally impossible to please other sentient beings. Even the Buddha acted with good motivation, and some people got very upset and angry at the Buddha. Yeah. So the key here is our motivation, not other people's response to our action. However, sometimes people may respond very well to our action. And so we may think, oh, what I did was great. But actually, our intention was rotten. Okay? So we have to look at those kinds of things too. Sometimes we do things, other people are very happy, but we know in our heart we were manipulating, we lied, we were deceptive, we pretended to have qualities we didn't have, we denied having bad qualities we did have. Okay? So we have to look at what our intention is and assess that in a very clear way without all this constant criticism of ourselves. Okay? So what I'm getting at is there's various permutations here between our motivation and somebody else's response. Okay? We can have a good motivation and people have a good response.
Make it safe for everybody else.
Good. Yeah, you have that motivation to clean the sidewalks, to make it safe for everybody else, and other people are happy about that. Okay. We can also have a good motivation and other people are unhappy. What's an example of that?
You do the same action, but then the person feels like, you mean you think I can't do this? Do you think I'm not with it anymore, that I can't see the sidewalk?
Okay, that's a good one, yeah. So you do it with a good motivation, and that other person takes offense, thinking that you're infantilizing them, saying, well, you don't have the capability to shovel the sidewalk anymore, and, okay. Then we can also have a bad motivation, yeah, and people react with in a bad way. They're upset. What's an example of that?
Not wanting to shovel, but doing it anyways.
No, but you need people to have, huh?
Being angry while you're shoveling because you're shoveling.
Yeah, but you need other people to have a bad reaction.
Have a good reaction.
No, I said bad and bad.
Well, the same thing. They come along and they're grumbling too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't do it and they didn't want it done.
Yeah, okay. They wanted to build a snowman. And you shoveled their snow wanting to protect them, okay? Yeah. Yeah. Here we're using a very superficial thing. Most of our negative actions have these two. Okay. Then it's also possible we do something with a bad motivation and people like it. And you don't have to stick with this same example, but what's something with a bad motivation and then people like it?
Donating, but looking for praise.
Yeah. You make a donation, but your motivation is wanting praise and recognition. Okay? So you can see, we have to be very astute here in evaluating our own actions. Yeah? And not say, oh, everything's good because people liked it, and not say everything's bad because they didn't like it. Yeah? Sometimes, because our motivation is the key thing, not the only thing in determining the ethical dimension of our action, but the key thing. And sometimes it's actually very difficult to know what our motivation is. Yeah, I've had situations in which I haven't really been able to discover what my true motivation for something was until years later. Because the situation itself was so emotional, my mind was so obscured, I couldn't really evaluate it at the time I was making the decision, or even for a few years afterwards. Yeah, because when our mind gets really emotional, it's very difficult to see clearly, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so we do the best we can, and as time goes on, we also discover, more and more kind of layers to the negativities, different things that we find we really regret having done. Yeah. Okay, so regret is very different than guilt. Yeah. Repeat. Yeah. Regret is not guilt. Guilt is not regret. Okay? So we have to learn how to generate regret without going into guilt. Okay? Because most of us have been taught guilt. We haven't been taught regret. Yeah. And this is something Western religion is very good at. Okay, so I think Catholics or former Catholics, yeah, you're kind of pretty good in guilt, huh? Jews, yeah, we're better. We have more guilt than anybody else. Yeah. Okay, evangelical Christians, yeah, you're pretty good in guilt too. Yeah. Then the rest of the Protestants, they're just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, wishy-washy. But I think they have their share too. So, and as children, we were often taught guilt too. And so what I discovered in looking at my own mind was there was this idea that the guiltier I felt, the more I blamed myself, the more I hated myself for what I did, the more I was atoning for the harm I did for others. Yeah. So the way to purify was by hating myself and feeling guilty. Okay. Then you come along to Buddhism. Yeah. And it's very clear guilt and regret are totally different. And you do the Vajrasattva practice, and you're imagining Vajrasattva streaming blissful wisdom nectar into you. That's kind of the opposite of guilt, isn't it? Yeah. So in Buddhist practice, how do you purify? Yeah. You make a connection with the holy ones such that this blissful light and nectar flows from them into you. And that becomes, how you alleviate your heaviness, how you transform, how you release a bad motivation and are able to steer your mind towards a better motivation in the future. Okay? So this is totally the opposite of Western religion. Yeah. So we are not filling ourselves with, leaden, coal pollution, something like that, and that's what atones for what we did. We are filling ourselves with Vajrasattva's blissful light and wisdom nectar. Okay? Very important. So the difference between guilt and regret is guilt is tremendously self-centered. Yeah, it's all about how terrible and, incorrigible I am, beyond hope, how I deserve to suffer. Okay? That is not a helpful idea in Buddhism. Yeah. In fact, we hear His Holiness often say, all of us want happiness and not suffering, and none of us deserve to suffer. Even when we experience the results of our own destructive karma, it's not that we deserve to suffer. It's not that we're being punished. Yeah, the Buddha does not reward and punish anybody. We just create causes, and causes bring results. That's it. Okay? So we have to take out all this deserve stuff, all this punish stuff. Okay. And I say this because, for many people, this is really deeply rooted. We started learning it in our families when we were, this big. Now, having said that, we do need to make amends. So it isn't that, oh yeah, I did something negative, but I don't have any guilt about it, so bye, that's done. No, because still inside, we don't feel good about it. Yeah. So we have to own that part and then look at, well, what was my motivation that got me involved in that action? Yeah. Why was I doing that? How did I get myself into that situation to start with? Okay. Sometimes we'll see it was just a motivation right before that action. Sometimes we'll see that there was a whole long history of bad decisions, many of them which they were seemingly unimportant decisions. This is a term one of the inmates that I corresponded with made up, SUDs, seemingly unimportant decisions. Yeah, this was somebody who wound up with a 20-year prison sentence. He was a big drug dealer in Southern California. Yeah, 20 years is a long time when you're in your late 20s. Yeah, to get slapped with that kind of sentence. And he told me, when he was incarcerated, that, he had a lot of time to look at his life. And he began to see that there were a lot of SUDs, seemingly unimportant decisions, that slowly led him down the slippery slope. Yeah. Things that started maybe when he was 8 or 9 or 10 years old. Yeah. So we may see different things that either decisions we made long time ago that started us down that slope. We may also see different conditioning factors in our family, in our religious community that we grew up with our ethnic or racial community or whatever community we were in, how we grew up. There were certain conditioning factors there from our school, our playmates, the media. My goodness, how we got conditioned by the media, all that kind of rubbish. Yeah. And so this purification process gives us a chance to look at all of that. Yeah. Now, how we were conditioned as children, that's not our quote fault. That's just the conditioning that we had. We were kids. We couldn't assess it very well. Kids can't think very clearly. They tend to believe everything adults tell them. So when you were little, if somebody said, you're good for nothing, then you believe them. Usually. Yeah. My mother used to tell me I was good for nothing quite often. I didn't usually believe her. Yeah. I thought I was okay. But, but yeah, we get told that stuff. I mean, parents, when they're angry, they say all sorts of things to their kids that, of course, they don't mean. Yeah. But as kids, we take it in. Yeah. Even though the adults don't really mean it. So we begin to see some of those conditioning factors. Those we don't have to regret because we didn't do anything. But we do have to, as adults, as part of the purification process, say, that conditioning I received, those things I was taught, I don't believe them. I'm an adult now. I can choose what to believe. I can choose what not to believe. And those certain things that I was taught as a child, I really do not believe. And I'm putting them down and putting them aside. Yeah. Then you may see other things that you were not raised with as a child, that as an adult, you've begun to think about what your own values and principles are, and other things that, that you've come to adopt. And so we have the opportunity as adults, to recreate ourselves. We don't have to be limited by the previous conditioning. Yeah. So we are free to recondition our mind. And that's a lot what Buddhist practice is, we are reconditioning the mind with virtue. That's basically what we're doing. So, and so that's our responsibility. So all this stuff that other people taught us in the past that we don't believe, we don't blame them. We realize they were doing the best they could, given their lives and their situation. Yeah. So we don't blame our parents. We don't blame, other people around us for when we were kids. Because if we get stuck in blaming people for our present problems, then we're the ones who are making ourselves into victims. And we're the ones that are limiting our own mind by having anger and resentment and blame towards others. Okay? So all of this is stuff that we have to look at in the purification process in order to really discern what's my responsibility and what isn't. And what kind of person do I want to be, and what kind of person don't I want to be? And what do I really believe? What are my values and principles, and what aren't? Yeah. So all this is involved in the purification process. So that's why we purify every day. Okay? It's not that we just, New Year's Eve do Vajrasattva, and then the rest of the year do who knows what. Yeah. And it's not that our whole life we do who knows what, and then when we're dying, all of a sudden, oh, Vajrasattva, please, No. Okay. So, but this is actually a good way, I think, purifying every day of maintaining our balance psychologically. Because if we purify every day, then we don't stock up on resentment and bitterness against other people. Yeah, we're able every evening to look through our day and realistically evaluate things. Okay, somebody else was off kilter. They said something, that really pushed my buttons. And I responded with anger. My anger, my critical words are my responsibility. Yeah. What somebody else did, I have compassion for them because they were just in a bad mood or out of it or whatever. Yeah. So I'm not going to spend my time thinking about what other people did to me. I'm going to spend my time thinking about how I responded to it. Okay? And I think psychologically, this is very important because when I talk to people, and I'm not a therapist, but I hear a lot of stuff, yeah, is people always tell me about the harms other people inflicted on them. How they were abused as children, how they were abused as adults, all this kind of stuff. Very rarely does anybody tell me about how they abused others. Once in a while. Yeah, I had one man tell me about abuse. The inmates I write to, they tell me about how they abused others. They're very frank about it. I find very often vets Are any of you vets, combat vets? Nobody. Okay. Often combat vets are very in touch with what they did that they regret. And they can be open and honest about it. Okay? But by and large, we tend to blame other people and feel sorry for ourselves. And we go through our whole life making the court case about how awful other people were to us and how we deserve something better. Are we happy? No, that attitude makes us totally miserable. It also makes us perpetually angry with other people and dissatisfied, and it destroys our relationships. Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah. So, this discerning factor, it really takes some time to develop. And it's trial and error, and we just got to go through it and do it. Okay? Talking to other people, getting other people's perspectives on things can be very helpful because, like I said, sometimes we're too emotional to really evaluate something very, very clearly. But again, just because somebody says it's positive or negative, you have to determine yourself if that is true. Okay? So in the process of purification, the first step is having this kind of regret. And the regret isn't, I regret hurting somebody. Of course we regret hurting somebody. But the regret is, I regret doing this non-virtuous action, regardless of if somebody else was hurt or not. I regret my rotten way of thinking. Yeah. So a regret, again, it doesn't mean I feel guilty about it. It just means, wow, I wish that I hadn't done that. But I did, so I'm owning it. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm sinful and deserve punishment. Yeah, I'm just owning it, and I want to learn from this situation. So I'm willing to look at what were the conditioning factors, external conditioning factors that affected me, and how was I thinking? And what kind of mental factors, what kind of emotional factors or views were lying behind the way I thought about and responded? Yeah. Or just even initiated an action, maybe not responding to one, but initiating one. What really was my motivation? Okay. And then when we see there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, then, we have regret and we make amends. So making amends, this is the second of the four opponent powers. The first one is regret. So the way they traditionally explain this one is you rely on the same beings with which you created the negative karma to now make amends. Okay? I call it restoring the relationship. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to go to the other person and talk to them. Sometimes they may no longer be alive. Sometimes they may not be ready to talk to us yet. Sometimes we may have lost touch with them. Okay? But the real thing is that inside of ourselves, our attitude towards them has changed. So when we did something negative with them as the object, we had a really rotten motivation. Now, to restore the relationship, we generate a good motivation. We generate one of love, of compassion, of bodhicitta. Okay? It doesn't matter whether we like the person or not. Okay? It doesn't matter whether they've forgiven us or not. It doesn't matter whether we've said something to them or not. What matters is if we are able to transform our attitude. If we are still holding a grudge against that other person, because often situations in which we acted negatively, it's a complex situation, isn't it? It isn't just that an event happened out of the blue. It's like there's this relationship and they did this and I did that and they did this and I did that and the whole thing's all jumbled up together. Yeah. So it simply means, that we have to let go of our anger and our resentment. Yeah. Whether they apologize or not does not matter beans. Because if you stake your own internal happiness waiting for somebody else's apology, what's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to wait a long time. Have you apologized to everybody you need to apologize to? Have you even thought about the people you need to apologize to? Or have you stuffed that all under the table? Yeah. So don't wait for other people to apologize and to own their part of the stuff, the situation. That's not the issue. The issue is, am I holding on to negative feelings towards somebody? Okay. So like I said, you don't have to like the person when you forgive them. And it doesn't mean that you forget what they did, because sometimes you need to remember what they did so you can protect yourself in the future. But you no longer hold rancor. That's the part, okay, of transforming your relationship with them. So it's not that inside you hold rancor, but you say, I generate bodhicitta for them and all other sentient beings. Yeah, I'm going to lead them to awakening. That idiot. Beep, 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 beep. Idiot who did that to me. I'm going to lead them to full awakening. No, we have to really kind of, let go of our hatred. Okay? So there's all sorts of stuff in here to purify, because it isn't just like anger and hatred against one person who harmed us. This also includes prejudice against whole groups of people. Hatred that we hold against entire groups of people because maybe a few members of that group harmed us. Yeah? So this process of purification goes very, very deep, and we have to really own a lot of our prejudice, which we know in this day and age is not very pleasant to own. But we own it, we regret it, we change our attitude, life continues. Okay? So again, the purification process is so we can put these things down and go on with our lives with a happy, comfortable mind. Yeah. It's not so that we instill more guilt upon ourselves than we had before. Yeah, that's not the purpose. Okay? So sentient beings are one of the groups of people we have to restore our relationship with. The other group is holy beings. So that could be our spiritual mentors, or it could be the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Now, you may say, well, how do I create negative karma with the Buddha Dharma and Sangha? I used to tease the people in Singapore about this a lot, because at the beginning of, when there was going to be a Dharma talk, then they would bring offerings and put them all on the altar. And then at the end of the Dharma talk, they would take them all down and eat them. So I asked them, did you bring them? Did you really offer them to the three jewels, or did you just put them on the altar until it was time for you to eat them? Did you really offer them or not? Yeah, because the thing is, if we take property that belongs to the three jewels for ourselves, it's stealing from the three jewels. In the same way as if there's a donation basket, and there's some loose bills there, and you're a little short on money this week, so you borrow a little bit from the three jewels, they won't miss it. No, you're stealing. You take a book from the Abbey's library, and even though it says don't take it to your room, you take it to your room. And even though it says don't take it home with you, you accidentally on purpose take it home with you. Yeah. And this happens by the most well-intentioned beings. We have some friends in Coeur d'Alene, who've been supporters of the Abbey for years, who we know would never want to steal. But we went one day to visit their home, and they had Abbey library books. That they had just, there was only one book that, that somebody saw. There may have been more. That somehow, I guess these books must have flown from here to Coeur d'Alene, but, so this kind of thing happens. Yeah. So that becomes stealing from the Sangha. Yeah. If there's Sangha property that has not been left out for communal use, but you go and take it, okay, if the bathroom has run out of toilet paper, please take some toilet paper, but not to take home, put it in the bathroom, okay? Yeah, but don't go in the kitchen and take food that hasn't been put out for everybody to enjoy, because that food hasn't been offered to everybody. And this is something that the cooks really have to look out for, because it's so tempting when you're a cook. There's only a little bit of something, and if I put it out, there's not enough for everybody, so I better eat it. Yeah, you know how that is? Yeah, there's not enough for everybody, so I can't really put it out. Well, you can, but, but so I better just eat it myself. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with Sangha property. Yeah. In the similar way, if people come to us and they offer money for the Buddha, Dharma, or Sangha, the Abbey has to use it for the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Okay, we can't, just do whatever we want with it. Because sometimes people will come and they will offer jewelry, to the Buddha statue, and we can't just take that and say, this looks really good on me. Aside from the fact that we have a precept not to wear jewelry, but, we have to use it. And if it doesn't, if we can't leave it out because it's expensive, something may happen to it, and we feel that it's better to sell it, then we go back to the person who offered it, if we know who that person is. We ask for their permission to sell it, and then we use the money for the altar or for, clothes for the Buddhas, or to buy more statues or something like that. Okay? So this kind of thing is, we can also create negativity in relationship to the holy objects. And also with our spiritual teacher, same thing, who do you get mad at the most? We won't talk about that. Yeah? So all this kind of stuff needs to be purified. Okay, then the third of the 4 Pauna powers is making some determination to avoid the action again. Yeah, so there's some things that we've done that where we feel, I will never do this again. Enough is enough. I'm done. And we really say, I will never do this again. Other things like idle talk, can we really say I'm never going to do it again? Maybe it's better to say for the next 3 days, I won't have any idle talk. And then you renew it after a few days. Yeah. So something realistic that we can keep and feel good about keeping. Hmm? Yeah. And then the fourth opponent power is a remedial activity. Yeah. So in the Vajrasattva practice, that remedial activity is visualizing Vajrasattva with the light and nectar flowing down into us, feeling very blissful, and reciting the mantra. Okay, so that's the remedial action in the Vajrasattva practice. In the 35 Buddha practice, which you did this morning, right? Then the remedial part is saying the names of the Buddhas, the 35 Buddhas, and bowing. Yeah. Making offerings, be it to the 3 jewels, to a monastery, to a dharma center, to a charity. You're somehow giving. You're taking delight in giving. That's something quite virtuous, and that can be a remedial act, one of the remedial actions. Okay. In Singapore, they have, and Malaysia too, and Taiwan, they have this very nice tradition of offering books for free distribution, Dharma books. So that's actually how my writing began, because one man came to the temple where I was staying when I first came there, and he said, if you ever want to write a book, tell me, and because I'd like to donate some money so it can be freely distributed. Yeah. And then after that, another young man came, and he had 24 Dharma questions. And then as I began teaching, people asked the same questions. And so I put together, and then somebody loaned me a computer. One of those old ones. Remember the computers where the screen was black and the letters were green? Do you remember those? And you had these big kind of floppy disk kind of things. Yeah, so somebody loaned me a computer. So I wrote this tiny book called I Wonder Why, which later got revamped and became Buddhism for Beginners. Okay, but this is, it was started because of this man's, his offer, his generosity. Yeah. So any kind of virtuous action, volunteering for a charity, anything can be remedial action. Yeah, doing your spiritual practice, meditating on emptiness or on bodhicitta, whatever. Okay? Okay, so if we look at the Vajrasattva practice here, let's find those. Okay, so here, at the beginning, we start out, here it's called the power of reliance. It's what I was calling the power of restoring the relationship. So taking refuge is how we restore the relationship with our spiritual mentors and with the Buddha Dharma Sangha. And bodhicitta is how we restore the relationship with other sentient beings. So even if it's artificial bodhicitta, that's how, that's putting a drop in the bucket to eventually getting to genuine spontaneous bodhicitta. Okay? So we visualize Vajrasattva, then we take refuge in Vajrasattva and the three jewels. We generate bodhicitta for all beings. Okay? Then, so here it doesn't, the order of the four is not the same as I just described them to you. And there are many different texts that have different orders of the four. Okay, so don't get confused. Then the second one here in this sadhana is the power of regret. So we spend some time thinking about what we want to purify. Yeah. And I should mention here that, you know, we've done all sorts of negative actions in previous lives that we don't remember. We have no conscious memory of having done them. But it's still good to say, I purify all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. Make that broad statement, even though you don't remember specifics. Okay? And also, what I've found is as you study more about karma, you learn more about things to avoid. And you realize, oh boy, I created some negative karma there. And also, if you hang around long enough, you will see people create unbelievable karma with the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Yeah, things that you can't imagine people would do, they do. So when you read when you do the 35 Buddhas, and there's the confession prayer, it's actually 3 heaps: confession, rejoicing, and dedication. So the first part is the confession part, and you read all those things out, yeah, and you go, how could somebody do that? Or in the prayer that follows that starts out, woe is me, you read that, how could somebody do that? Well, people do, yeah? And be careful that you don't. But sometimes, I remember when I started out, it's like, how could somebody do that? Like stealing from the Sangha. Who would, or you read the Bodhisattva vows and the different ethical downfalls in the Bodhisattva vows. How could somebody do that? And then you see people do it. And then you say, oh, I wonder if I did that in a previous life. Because they say we've done everything in previous lives. So I find it very helpful that whenever I see any negative action done by anybody whatsoever, I think all the times when I have acted like that. Yeah? And that I find very helpful. It abolishes conceit. Yeah. It puts me on an equal level. And it helps me purify who knows what I've done in previous lives. Okay? So, somebody was asking me yesterday at lunchtime if I would talk a little bit about the present situation in the world and how to deal with it. So this is one small element of it. When I see the kinds of things dear Donnie is doing, yeah, and his motivation, at least what seems to be, from what I can tell from the outside, quite an angry person who's acting and doing many harmful actions that harm the lives of many, many people. Then instead of thinking, oh, he's such a jerk, I'm better, to think, well, I wonder if I had that kind of power in a previous life. Maybe I was the head of a nation in a previous life and filled with egotism and conceit, and I just totally ignored others' welfare and abused the power and harmed living beings. Yeah? There's plenty of, in history, people I could have been on this earth, but also beyond in other lives, other universes. I could have been somebody having some power in society who really abused that power. Yeah. And so I think I can't remember it, but whatever I did in the past, if I did that kind of thing, I regret it, and I will never do that again. Yeah. I may not have governmental power now, but whatever little power I have and whatever small groups I'm a part of, I will do my best never to abuse that power and never to abuse the trust other people have placed in me. And so I find that personally very helpful. Yeah, because it helps me set very strong determinations about how I want to be and how I don't want to be in the future. And it helps me clarify very much what kind of values I hold. Yeah. Now, the trick, of course, to not abusing power is to be able to discern when you're abusing it and when you're not. Because I'm sure dear Donnie doesn't think that he's abusing it. Yeah? So, how many times in my past life have I abused power and thought I was doing something good? So then I make prayers. May I always be aware of what I'm doing so that if I do something negative, or if I'm about to do something negative, I realize that and I stop it. Yeah. Because so often, we just don't realize we're committing destructive karma when we're doing it. In white-collar situations, yeah, we have all sorts of ways, of rationalizing. When you're cooking the books, yeah, you're the accountant and you're cooking the books. Yeah, and some accountants may say, yeah, I know I'm cooking the books. Yeah, like Bernie Madoff. Yeah, so I have true confession. On the flight back from Singapore to San Francisco, there was a film about Bernie Madoff that Venerable Damcha showed me and encouraged me to watch. So it's not all my fault. No, it is, because I was the one who watched it and, did that. But it was an amazing study of that person's mind. And it really made me think afterwards, did he even realize what he was doing? Yeah. Did he realize that in his own mind, did he call it stealing? Did he call it cheating and lying? Or in his own mind, did he call it something else? In his mind, did he care about how he was affecting other living beings? Not only the people he cheated, but in the movie it really shows the effect on his family. And as we all know, one of his sons committed suicide. Yeah? So it made me think, wow, could I have been like that in a previous life? Cheating, being deceptive, not really thinking anything was bad about it, not really thinking I was harming other people. Yeah, because the interviewer, part of the movie showed somebody interviewing him. And what was it she asked? Like, did you think about the effect this was going to have on your family? And what was it he responded? Do you remember?
No, it was that she asked if you suddenly died.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. If you suddenly died and your sons inherited the company, did you ever think that they would be criminally liable for what was going on in the company? because it seems the sons didn't know what was going on with him. He kept it hidden from anybody. But if he had died and they inherited it, they were the ones who would have wound up in prison. And she asked him, did you ever think about that? And he was kind of blank-faced, wasn't he? It was like you could see, no, he never thought about the implications for his children, who he loved dearly, even though he sometimes treated them quite awfully. Yeah. So it makes me think, well, when was I like that? I mean, I could have been like that. Why not? Yeah, why not? Who knows what kind of personality I had in previous lives? Okay. Or like, what really scared me is, what was his name in Vegas? The one who did who did the shootings? What? Anybody? What was his name? Huh?
Stephen Paddock? Yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
Paddock.
Paddock? Stephen Paddock. Yeah. Could I have ever been a person like that? It's like mysterious why he did that, what he got out of doing it. There was mass confusion in his mind. But could I have done something like that in a previous lives? Why not? When you're in samsara and you have 84,000 afflictions, we're prone to anything. Yeah. Most of the people I write to who are incarcerated never thought they would go to prison. Yeah, never thought. I write to one he's not young anymore. He's in his 40s. When he was 17, he and two others took one of the friends of their group out into a meadow area and killed him for absolutely no purpose. No purpose. I mean, I've asked him, why did you do this? And it was just, they had been watching films, kind of what teenage boys watch about killing and fighting and this kind of stuff. And he said, we just did that. And, and then he got a sentence of juvenile life without parole. Yeah. And he's still in prison now, even though the Supreme Court has said that you can no longer give that sentence, even though the Supreme Court has said that their decision applies retroactively and that those kids who are now adults need a decent opportunity for parole. He's still in prison. He's turned himself around. He's a fantastic person now. He's not going to hurt anybody now. But boy, when he was 16, a year before he did it, he never thought, even walking out there, he never thought, I'm going to be spending the rest of my life in prison, and I'm going to destroy the happiness of another family, and I'm going to take away the life of my friend. Yeah? So you really begin to see sometimes what ignorance means, all the layers of, and this isn't even ignorance of the ultimate truth. This is just ignorance of conventional ethical conduct, ignorance of karma and its effects. And so, I find it helpful, when I read about these things, thinking, if I've ever done that, I make a decision. I will never do that again. And may I never be in a situation where that kind of action or even thought would ever be something, would ever come to my mind. Yeah. So, because often people say, oh, I've done Vajrasattva for a long time and I don't have any feeling for it. Yeah, I've kind of done a lot of purify. I mean, how many times can I purify having smashed my brother's toy robot. It's like, honey, you've done a lot worse things than that, on your mind stream. We just can't see them. But these are the kinds of things that can ripen in a lower rebirth. They can ripen in us having a short life and in having all sorts of obstacles. Okay, so when we're here on the power of regret, if you ever feel like you're running out of things, think about that stuff. Actually, think about it before you felt like you've run out of stuff. Just everything I've ever done in all my previous lives. Okay. Then, if you turn the page on page 38, then there's the power of the remedial action. So, like I said here, it's visualizing Vajrasattva above the crown of our head, saying mantra and imagining the blissful light and nectar filling us up. Okay. And then, if you turn the page again, on page 40, then you have the power of determination to not to do the action again. Okay? So that's how the 4 opponent powers fit in to this particular sadhana. I was intended to explain the visualization and everything to you, but I didn't get to that. So it'll happen. Somebody can do it while they're leading the meditation. Yeah.
I was wondering if the things that we have repulse for in this lifetime, that we have difficulty to accept,
Physical.
things that we have difficulty to accept, like somebody that rapes somebody or somebody that kills somebody or whatever, would that be a sign that in the past we have done something and it's not resolved in past lives? Would that be, signs?
You mean when we have particularly strong judgment
Yes.
against somebody who's done that? Perhaps. Maybe, maybe not. I've always wondered if I have fear of a particular thing, if that indicates perhaps I did that in the past. Yeah. So it's hard to know. We don't know, but it's good to purify it anyway. Yeah. Purification never hurts. Other questions? Yeah.
I often feel guilty about motivations I have for doing things and for thoughts I have. But when I get to the power of determination, it doesn't seem like I can honestly determine not to do it for a specific amount of time. And what I've done recently is say I determine to practice the antidote. Would that work for determination, or is that more remediation?
No, I think that is making a determination about how you want to go through, and then carrying that out would be the remediation. So you're not just saying, I will practice the antidote, but you actually practice it.
Right. So like I could make a commitment for a particular amount of time.
Yeah.
I'll practice the antidote, and then doing that's the remediation.
Yeah.
The remedial action. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's good. Yeah. It's hard to say, I'm not going to think about a certain thing, because if I say don't think about pink elephants, what's in your mind? A pink elephant. Yeah.
I am wondering if you can talk a little bit about intention as an excuse. When you were talking about that, like what I wrote down was how to balance our intention and being empathetic to how others will feel. Finding that line between saying like, well, I didn't intend to hurt their feelings, and maybe using that as an excuse to not consider others. Do you see what I mean? Like how it's kind of a fine line there. Like you can't consider others' feelings too much, because then you're just bound. But at the same time, like, it's not cut and dry, I sort of feel like.
So if it's an action like where we just were very ignorant and we really didn't consider how an action would affect somebody. We just did something and it wasn't even in our mind the effect it would have on somebody else. And afterwards we see, oh yeah, I did hurt somebody and I really regret that. And I did have a rotten motivation for doing what I did. Yeah, then we need to purify. Sometimes we may have had a really good motivation. We didn't consider that person would be hurt. Then, we still abide by our good motivation. And we say, okay, in the future, maybe I need to look more globally to make sure. But also, like you said, I can't limit my actions based on other people's getting hurt because whatever I do, somebody's not going to like it. Okay? So we have to act ethically, but we also have to take, to realize when we're going to be, or putting it this way, to realize how our actions affect others. Okay? So maybe we may realize if I do this action, it will affect somebody in a physical way, or an external way, but we don't realize that they're going to feel hurt because of it. We think, okay, if I do this, then they won't have that, but they have other stuff and it'll be completely fine. But we're not realizing that it's not the fact that they have other stuff, it's the fact that they're going to feel that their trust was betrayed. Are we? Yeah. So then it's like, okay, I don't want to I don't want anybody else to feel their trust has been betrayed. So I'll see if I can talk to them before I do the action and explain why I'm doing it and acknowledge that they may not like it, but let them know that it's not because I don't care about them at all. Yeah. It's hard to think about because and it's hard. I mean, we're limited beings. Yeah. Very often we think too much like this, and so we need to confess for not thinking more broadly. But also, we can't see everything, and we can't predict what everybody's going to think and feel, and we can't stop. We can't not do something virtuous because somebody else won't like it. Okay, you want to make an offering to a charity, but your husband, thank goodness you don't have a husband like this, but let's say you have a very nice husband. Okay, that's your husband. Yeah. So he's a good one, okay? You chose somebody good and you chose somebody good. Okay, but let's say you had another kind of husband who said, how can you give money to this charity? We want to go on a vacation to Alaska next year, and we need this money for our vacation. Yeah. Now, if it's your money, and not shared money, then you're completely free to do that, and there's no reason for you to feel guilty about creating merit from giving a donation. Okay? And, then you just have to bear the brunt of an angry husband. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Okay? That making some sense? Yeah. Okay? But we can't predict everything everybody's going to feel. People are so super sensitive. Today they're not going to get angry about this. Tomorrow they'll get angry about the same thing. Yeah, if we think human beings are predictable and sensible, we are out to lunch. Human beings are unpredictable, ignorant, and illogical. Yeah, we want happiness and not suffering, and we do all sorts of actions that create the cause of suffering, don't we? Yeah? I mean, I was a kid in the middle of the Vietnam War going, people are saying we're fighting this war and killing other people in order to live in peace. And I'm going, huh? Huh? These are grown-ups who I'm supposed to trust, who are thinking like this?
So was it Atisha who would sometimes like be in the middle of riding his horse with his retinue and then get off and then start spontaneously purifying, right?
Yeah.
So a couple things about that. So like for you, you're talking about people, and it sometimes happens to me too, that, you know, I sometimes maybe feel a little dry about the Vajrasattva. It's not inspiring. Like certainly there's plenty of things I could remember, but sometimes like, okay, enough of this already. I've purified for just about everything I can, you know. But I think also like if even a great scholar, practitioner, master like Atisha was doing purification, then clearly I definitely need it. And also, but I'm also wondering if there's a way to do it in a more spontaneous way. For example, like, so maybe if I do something I regret and I recognize that in the moment, like, I don't have to wait till I'm on a formal practice on my cushion, where I could just maybe do the 4 opponent powers, do some mantras, just, you know.
Right there in the moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm wondering
Yep.
if
That's the best thing to do. As soon as we see we've done something negative, immediately confess and resolve not to do it again and do some remedial action and so on. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. And the story he's telling about Lama Atisha, who was a great Indian sage who helped to bring the second transmission of the teachings to Tibet. They say that when he was traveling on his, you know, if he, because our tantric precepts are very delicate and you can break them just by what you're thinking. And if he had a thought that, you know, transgressed his precept, he would immediately stop. He had a stupa, he took that out, and he would bow and he would do the 4 opponent powers. Yeah. So that's the story. So it's a good example for us, isn't it? Yeah. Don't stop in the middle of the highway, though. Okay? Go off to the side. Christina.
Is it possible to have mixed motivations for doing an action? Because, you know, you can't have two opposing mental factors in your mind at the same time. So could you have, like, both a virtuous and a non-virtuous motivation for one specific action?
Sometimes we start out with one motivation. That's called the causal motivation. But then by the time we get to do the action, our motivation has changed, and that's called the immediate motivation. So the immediate motivation is going to be the stronger one, usually. Yeah, unless the causal one was very strong. Sometimes we go back and forth in our mind very quickly, because it's true, we can't have a virtuous and non-virtuous mental factors in our mind simultaneously. But we can go back and forth, you know. Like when I tell the story, my Maroon Kashmir Setter story, that's a good example of my motivation going back and forth and back and forth.